Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, the first in a series of webinars where we are presenting the ZOOOM Toolkit. Specifically, this session is targeted to developers and knowledge creators. And before we go on to discuss the actual tools that we provide with the toolkit, I would like to give you a brief introduction as to how the toolkit was born and what's in it for you as a developer and knowledge creator. So the toolkit was born out of the ZOOOM licensing framework, which is based on an approach that we adopted from another methodology called Structure Conduct Performance, or SCP, where we study the structure of companies, their conduct in terms of business, legal, and social conduct, and their performance in terms of economic sustainability, legal sustainability, and social sustainability. So this is all public work that you can consult on the website of our project, and it obviously deals with many of many of the tools originate in this framework and in the principles that are embedded in the framework, such as the IP strategy, for example, the licensing strategy, how to deal with outbound and inbound licensing, and what legal implications there are from the use of hybrid assets, such as, for example, artificial intelligence, which is a breach of data and software. So what is the ZOOOM Toolkit? It's really a resource which offers you knowledge, tools, collections of best practices, not just practices and tools collected and created in ZOOM, but also practices and tools from other reputable organizations, such as, for example, the Free Software Foundation Europe or the Linux Foundation in the US. There are four main categories of four main sections, I would say, of the toolkit. As you can see, the first one is called Open Asset Strategy, where we basically provide you with some tools on how to combine different licenses and how to come up with a business model based on your preferences and risk appetite or ethos or other considerations that are not necessarily always purely economic or monetary. We then have a library of cases where we explore valuable business cases within the free open source technologies that we study, namely software, hardware, and data. We present some successful use cases that apply to these three categories. We then have a training program, training materials, which offers some basic and advanced courses, and they aim to equip you with the knowledge and skills that you need to integrate open source technologies and open source licensing approaches into your enterprise. And finally, this is a bit experimental, but we created a special section on artificial intelligence where we try to bridge together the technical, legal, and business aspects that relate to the development and use and deployment of artificial intelligence. So in terms of specific tools that we offer, you can see here that we've tried to group them more or less into licensing, compliance, and business tools, and we're going to look into them in a few moments when I actually get to show you the toolkit. But we also have a useful glossary which provides you with some explanations on commonly on terms you would meet commonly in these sort of discussions, such as, for example, what is a GPL, what is a business model, at least in the way we understand it in ZOOM. The library of cases, which is a rich collection of real-world open source success stories across very many different industries and technologies, and also the business tools where we try to guide you as to how to generate value from your from intellectual property using an open an open source approach, both in terms of development so open source development practice, but also in terms of licensing. So how you share your work and how you monetize this work with the world, basically using open source licenses. And then we also have the training materials, some tools for supporting organizations, which we will not dive into today because they concern organizations such as consultancies or intellectual property offices or other sort of organizations that aim to support you in your activity as knowledge generator, as creator of intellectual property. There is a special webinar devoted to this in the afternoon and also tomorrow. And we also have this special section on AI as hybrid asset and a framework which aims to provide you with information on and understanding as to how businesses, innovation, and open source ecosystem work together. So in terms of licensing tools, and this actually applies to all categories of tools that we have divided them into the three main categories of open source software, open data, and open hardware. Why is that? Well, because first of all, in terms of intellectual property, there are different rights that apply to each of these categories of subject matter. So you have copyright in software. You typically don't have copyright in data, but you might have database rights, for example, or contractual limitations. And then when it comes to hardware, you have a vast array of different rights. You might have copyrights in the documentation, for example. You might have design rights in the designs. And you might also have patents, which, of course, in the case of open hardware, is not that common. So most companies in the open hardware business don't file patent applications, but that does not mean that they don't need to be aware of the implications of existing patent portfolios and what they are doing. So, for example, to make sure that you're not infringing on someone's, that your invention, that your creation device is not infringing on someone's patent. Same goes for the business tools, where we provide you with some guidance. Especially the highlights of the business tools is really the business model innovation map, which is now interactive in the ZOOOM Toolkit, which offers you the opportunity to identify and explore successful business models that utilize open source technologies. And then you have a downloadable version, so it's like literally a canvas that you could print and use, for example, in a workshop. But there is also an interactive tool that you can play with to, come up with a solution or examples of solutions that could meet your needs and preferences. In terms of business profiles, we offer a set of scenarios, I'd say typified scenarios for different types of companies. So, for example, here we have a case of a startup aiming to enhance sustainable agriculture, or a digital graphics tools company with a substantive patent portfolio, or a medium-sized company aiming to become an enabler in open data ecosystem. So for these typified business profiles, we provide you with a list of questions that would guide you in making strategic decisions about whether to adopt an open source licensing strategy, for example, what the recent opportunities are, and whether that's something that would work for your company in the long run. Because the biggest challenge that we identified in ZOOM is that many companies decide to go open source without having a sustainability plan. So they don't know how to tackle challenges such as what happens if somebody starts making money using your freely distributed product. What happens if somebody starts making a lot of money using this same product? So if you don't have a clear strategy on how to deal with the fact that your IP is basically open to anybody to use under certain conditions, then that might mean that you need to think through more thoroughly your strategy to make sure that that you're making a sound choice. Because open source is not a panacea. It does not mean that it would apply to just about any business case. And that's where we try to intervene and help to really guide you in the process of aligning your business strategy, so your revenue generation strategy, with your licensing strategy, how you actually monetize the intellectual property, and whether that's how you're going to make money, in fact. In addition to these business profiles, we also have the tools for supporting organizations, which, as I said, will probably not be of interest to you, but they basically, just to give you an idea of what they're about, we have these, it's all organized around this idea of running open source program offices as a service that can be provided, for example, by technology transfer offices or IP offices, or legal and R&D departments, or indeed individual consultants and companies providing this comprehensive open source management service on demand, as opposed to having a structured office within your company, which could be both costly and, in many cases of starting companies, for example, not very efficient or economically justified. The next tool that we have in the toolkit is the glossary, where you can find and learn most of the relevant terms that apply to the ecosystem of open source software, open data, and open hardware. So you can see here examples of common terms such as AGPL, Apache, BSD, but also some more, let's say, commonly heard but often misunderstood terms, such as, for example, what is a copyleft license. So we're trying to provide you with vetted, trustworthy information on certain terms that are often misused, I would say, and sometimes advertently, sometimes inadvertently. We also have the section on frequently asked questions. So, for example, we've tried to make this as useful as possible, in the sense that, for instance, we offer answers to questions such as, how can open data or open hardware generate revenue? What are best practices for dealing and developing and licensing open source software or hardware, and also some basically strategies for joining innovation ecosystems based on open source, or what's in it for you as a company. And then we have the library of cases, which, as I said, is based on qualitative and quantitative studies that we conducted in the course of the project, and that summarize essentially some insights aim to provide with inspiration or a deeper understanding of how some of these companies operating partly or wholly using open source technologies, how they have succeeded in their industry and beyond, and also how these cases can serve as an inspiration for you. So we have grouped these cases per categories, such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, or indeed the three O's, so open source software, open hardware, and open data. And then we also have a training program, which, as I said, covers a set of some lightweight, some a bit more advanced modules on basically technological, legal, and business aspects of open source. This training program really aims to give you the knowledge and skills to navigate open source software, open hardware, and open data. We have a good mix, I'd say, a balanced mix of engaging videos and slides with additional reading material, and also references to some tools. Like I said, these training modules are not just developed within the context of our project, but they also incorporate material from other trustworthy and well-recognized organizations in the open source domain, such as the Free Software Foundation Europe, who are also a ZOOM partner, as well as organizations like the Linux Foundation, which has a brilliant collection of educational and training resources that can help you build upon the really basics that you would gain out of our training modules. And then finally, we have AI as a hybrid asset. Like I said, this is a bit experimental, an experimental section of our toolkit where we really aim to provide with a walkthrough to the components of artificial intelligence and their relation to IP protection. Obviously, our focus here is on machine learning, so we're dealing really with models mostly, and not other approaches to AI. But the novelty aspect of this element of the toolkit is that we offer you a perspective to AI which looks at it as a form of a novel hybrid asset of intellectual property, where you don't have just software or just data, but rather you have a combination where the two come together, and where you need to think simultaneously about how to license this whole thing as a package, where different IP rights might subsist in different elements of the package. So this is made visually interactive and appealing, and can give you a good idea of how you could approach AI from a business and licensing perspective. So this is just an idea of just a snapshot from our business canvas that I'm going to show you in a moment. And this is the contact information for our project. So now let's dive into the actual toolkit. I have loaded it here for you. So first of all, how to access the toolkit? Well, you could go to our zoom4u.eu starting page. As you can see, this is our website, and then you could click on the Zoom Toolkit in the upper right corner, which would take you to the main page of the toolkit. So from here, you have two options, either to go per category. So for example, if you're only interested in the training material, you could just click training material and be done with it. Or you could click on get started, and then this would take you to the toolkit journey. So let's take a look, for example, at some of the tools. You're a developer, you want to use certain open source components, whether libraries or whether you want to build your own solution from scratch. But sooner rather than later, you're going to rely on someone else's code, which means that you will have to think of the licensing implications of these choices. So you could go to licensing tools, and then, for example, something that you would probably find useful would be our Zoom licensing decision tree. So we ask you a set of questions based on what you want to achieve with your organization and your software product. Based on that, we will guide you through the different choices that you can make. So we have such a tool for software, and we have a similar tool for open data, which was actually developed in the context of a project at the Open Data Institute in the UK. We don't have a similar tool for hardware because, like I said, open hardware is still pretty much work in progress. There's not that much commercial adoption, and also the licenses are few, and by far the most popular license in open hardware that we have is the SolarPath license, which is basically heavily inspired by the Apache 2.0 license that is well known in the open source community. It's one of the most well-known and widely adopted permissive open source license. So let's give the licensing decision a try. So we can start with the questions if we click here. And as you can see, the first question is, do you want to restrict the use of software? So this is really a fundamental question. And by restriction, we mean any sort of restrictions. For example, if you want to say, I don't want people to be using my piece of software for commercial purposes, or I would like to avoid big cloud computing service providers from, taking my software, uploading them to their platforms and offering it as a service without me actually getting anything. So I want to prohibit them from doing this. If you want to insert any such sort of restriction in your in the way you distribute your software, then that would not be compatible with the open source definition. And we provide vast resources on the elements of this definition and what they mean in practice. You can consult them on the Zoom website in the outcomes section. But the essence is, if you want to restrict in any way the user freedoms of running the software, studying the software, modifying the software, or sharing these modifications with third parties, then generally open source would not be a good approach. So let's give it a try. So if we say, yes, I want to restrict the use of the software, and then there you have your straight answer. Open source is not an option. We have licenses such as, for instance, the business source license and other so-called source available licenses, but they are generally not accepted as open source licenses precisely because they include these extra limitations, whether it's field of use or other sort of, we call them in the definition of stewarded by the open source initiative, we call these field of use restrictions, or again, non-discrimination. So let's assume that I don't want to restrict the use of the software, which would take us to the second question. Do you seek maximum adoption? So do we want everybody to be able to use our software the way they see fit, which usually means we want to go for a permissive license. Or if we don't seek maximum adoption, if we want to control more or less or require that, for example, if you modify the software, you have to always share these modifications with the others, then we would probably lean more towards the copyleft family of licenses. So let's say I want maximum adoption in this case. The third question is, would you like to get attribution when people use your software? Yes, I would like to get attribution because most people like their name being mentioned whenever somebody uses their product. Do we care to have grant express patent licenses, especially if you operate in a field? And today, practically more than half of the filed patents are patents for computer implemented inventions. You would probably want to have this grant express license. Now, we don't have the time to explain the essence of this, but we have resources in our work in Zoom where we explain what these patent licenses mean and how they might be important for your business. So let's say, just to be on the safe side, that I would like to grant express licenses, patents, and there we go. The recommended license for what we want to release is Apache 2.0. So these two can be quite useful if you're just not sure whether under what license you should release what you're building. So let's go back to the licensing tools, because we only have 5 more minutes left, and I would like to also guide you through the not so much the licensing tools, but rather the business tools. So in the business tools, I mentioned that one of the highlights of this work is the business model innovation map. So let's go and take a look at it. Like I said, we have a downloadable version, but let's go through the interactive version of this map. So the idea is to help you identify and explore successful business models that utilize open source elements and maybe give you an inspiration as to how you could apply these to your own use case. So first things first, we need to specify the business objectives. And for example, let's say that we're just going to choose one of these 6 categories. So for example, let's pick a random one, like I am looking for extending my business to additional sources of income from different kinds of assets. So for example, I want to combine software and data. And then if you choose this, you can straightforwardly see some of the business models that could apply. So for example, you could go for advertising using open source software. And we have the example of Mozilla Firefox, where for years they have been shipping Firefox with Google set as the default engine. We explain how you could generate, where you generate value from, so for example, from linked assets, and the details about these values are just advertising, for example. So let's give it a try with another example. For instance, I want to generate business focusing on my own open source assets, so like the piece of software or hardware that I'm developing. And then we in some cases, like in this one, we also ask you to identify your value proposition. So, for example, I want to focus on value creation opportunities embedded in services relating to open assets. So I want to provide services based on the asset that I have. And there you have your answer. Possible business models for you would be open core or a package suit. And we give you some examples of companies that have been successful, how you generate value, and where we have some examples of this value. In this case, we don't have any. But the point is that you can this can help you really start thinking about potentially useful business models to your own activity, which should facilitate your choice of the ultimate business model for your company, and whether it's consistent, compatible with an open source licensing strategy or not. So I would say you should probably use the business tools first, and then once you have made a decision on your business model, you would then have to start thinking as to whether and what part of your IP portfolio you should release under an open source license. We generally advise the 80-20 rule. So in most cases, in most companies, it is 20% of the assets are crucial, essential IP that you need to protect very carefully, whereas the remaining 80% actually are just these supporting intellectual properties, we call them. And it's usually these 80% that you can afford to license on a more lenient terms, including open source licensing. Whereas for the 20%, depending on the industry in which you operate, you might decide to go, for example, even for more stringent protections, such as obtaining a patent which gives you a 20-year monopoly. And then finally, before we wrap up, I would like to just show you briefly the library of cases, which might again give you some inspiration for other companies, from other companies that have been successful using open source. So this is how it looks. You go to the web page and the respective company, and then you see a short description of what they've done, some links to their web pages, their story, where they are based in, and also some excerpts from how they actually use open source technologies in what they do, and also some of the relevant licenses that they apply when releasing such projects. So this is it. There is obviously so much more to explore, but these webinars are short on purpose. We just want to introduce you into the toolkit and, of course, have you explore it at your leisure when you have the time. We are, of course, available to respond to any questions you may have. And we look forward to hearing your feedback, because this toolkit will actually be is released under a permissive Creative Commons license, and will be released, the code will be released also publicly and uploaded to a public repository. The idea is that people like yourself can take this toolkit and advance it and develop further, or even adapt it to your own needs. So it's really just a collection of tools. It's not a rigid product that we aim at selling, rather a collection of pick and choose tools that you might find useful in different stages of your journey. So thank you very much for joining this webinar. And don't forget to also sign up for our upcoming webinar. So we have a similar webinar coming up tomorrow, again, for knowledge creators and developers. And we have our afternoon webinars for supporting organizations at 3 p.m. Central European time. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing your feedback.